Hey, how are you? Is this working? Nice to see some of you here. I say nice to see some of you here. I saw that there was 15 people waiting. Now I've gone live. There you are. There you are. Hi, everyone. Lovely to see you. Say hello in the chat. It's always, there you are. It's always so hard to get started. You just don't know who's going to turn up. But I can see you there. Thank you for joining me. If you want to invite anybody, all you have to do is copy the link from YouTube and share it with a friend. So nice to see you. Hello, Daniela. Hello. My Cyrillic knowledge is always bad. I should learn it, Hello, I can see both of you. We're going to probably going to just do a short one tonight, because, well, we'll see. We'll see how things go. But I want to run off and meet my friend and have a meal and watch the football. And I bought a book this week. Now, 3 different people have recommended this book to me in the Fishbowl. That's the Lesson Stream membership forum. Lisa, Fabio, and Damon. 3 different people have recommended this book. And I wonder if you've seen it or come across it, have heard about it before. It's called Storyworthy, by this guy called Matthew Dix. Anyone heard of this? Hi, Mark. Hello, Olga. And I have to admit, I don't think much of the front cover. Do you? Doesn't really do much. I assumed that this was actually about using story in business. And so I kind of resisted it for a while. But these 3 voices in the Fishbowl were quite loud. And when Damien was the 3rd person to add his voice to the list, I decided I had to buy it. And it's actually quite special, this book. The tagline there is engage, teach, persuade, and change your life through the power of storytelling. And so I think that's quite a big claim, isn't it? Now, it talks about one of the most important, if not the most important ingredient for a good story. Hi, Meg. Nice to see you here. I wonder if you can guess what this is. What is the most important ingredient for any story? We're not talking storytelling. We're not talking about the act of delivering it, performing it. We're talking about the story itself, the prepared story, maybe a film, maybe a short story, any kind of narrative. What is the most important ingredient or the most important factor or element? And he claims this to be one single word. And I find myself, or at least I found myself, questioning that. I mean, it's definitely something I've heard about before. I've got other books on storytelling that talk about the same thing. But the word he uses, or his claim, is that every great story has to be a story about change. Always about change. And I find myself questioning that. I wonder if you agree with that every great story, or virtually basically every story, is about change. I start to think of stories, the stories I love, the stories I tell, the stories I'm fond of. And I don't think they're always about change. Change is always going to be there because a story is a narrative. A narrative is kind of a sequence of events. Some people compare a story to a journey, so it'll always take you from one place to another place. So I guess change is always there, but he's meaning much more deeper change, transformation, realization, learning. And this is the part that I found very, very interesting. Chapter 4. Chapter 4, the title, Every Story Takes Only 5 Seconds to Tell, and Jurassic Park wasn't a movie about dinosaurs. I wonder if there's any Jurassic Park fans here, because this one got my attention. And again, I love this book because it really does sort of challenge you. And you might not agree with everything, but it does certainly challenge you. There are many secrets to storytelling, but there is one fundamental truth above all others that must be understood before a storyteller can ever be successful. And that is this. All great stories, I suppose there's an importance in the word great there, all great stories, regardless of length or depth or tone, tell the story of a 5-second moment in a person's life. So every great story, regardless of length or depth or tone, tell the story of a 5-second moment in a person's life. Let's say it again. Every great story ever told is essentially about a 5-second moment in the life of a human being, and the purpose of the story is to bring that moment to the greatest clarity. I know this sounds a little ridiculous, still reading here, but it's absolutely true. These 5-second moments are the moments in your life when something fundamentally changes, that word again, forever. You fall in love, you fall out of love, you discover something new about yourself or another person. Your opinion on a subject dramatically changes. You find forgiveness, you reach acceptance, you sink into despair, you grudgingly design, you're drowned in regret, you make a life-altering decision, choose a new path, accomplish something great, fail spectacularly. I wonder what you think of that. You know how much I like to see your chats, but participation is never necessary if you don't want to. But I'd love to know what you think of that. Now, it was interesting because I started thinking about this before I read on. How can every story be about a 5-second moment in a person's life? And the example he gives, or the first example he gives rather, is Jurassic Park. And I know Jurassic Park quite well. And did you notice the title of this chapter, chapter 4? Every story takes only 5 seconds to tell, and Jurassic Park wasn't a movie about dinosaurs. So Jurassic Park wasn't a movie about dinosaurs. What was it about? And how well do you know Jurassic Park? Do you remember at the beginning of the film? And I'm not going to spoil it, don't worry, because, I might want to tell you. I'm going to tell you what he says it's about anyway, but I don't think that's going to spoil it for you. But at the beginning of Jurassic Park, do you remember the main character? His name is Dr. Alan Grant. He's played by the actor Sam Neill. And he's obsessed with dinosaurs. That's what he studies. And he has a velociraptor claw. And he's showing it to this little boy. And this little boy is being slightly disrespectful about this doctor's work and velociraptors. And this little boy claims that he heard that, velociraptors are just like big turkeys. To which Alan Grant, the doctor, says, "Oh, big turkeys, really?" And then he shows him the velociraptor's claw and said, "You think a turkey, if it made an incision here in your belly and it made a big cut right through your abdomen until your guts fell out, would you still think it's a big turkey there?" And this little boy is kind of grossed out and freaking out by this image that man's putting in his mind. And then the other doctor, his romantic interest, says, "That was a bit horrible." And he says, "I hate children. I don't like kids. They're annoying. They're smelly. They're expensive. They're useless. I hate children." And they have this conversation about how much he hates children. Jump to, 2/3 of the way through the film. He finds himself in the company of these two kids. Do you remember the two kids, the two little children in Jurassic Park? And they're on the run from the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and they're taking they're up a tree. They're sleeping. It's nighttime, and they're sleeping up a tree. And they have this kind of warm moment where suddenly he realizes that he was wrong. He realizes, in fact, that he's found companionship and love in these two little kids. He's got his arms around them. And there's a little part of the dialogue here where one of the kids, called Lex, tells him, Lex says, what are you going to do now if you don't have it to dig up dinosaur bones anymore? And Dr. Grant says, "I guess we'll have to evolve too," about humans evolving. Tim, the other child, says, "What do you call a blind dinosaur?" Grant says, "I don't know. What do you call a blind dinosaur? Do you think he saw us? What do you call a blind dinosaur's dog? You got me. Do you think he saw us, Rex? So he's kind of bonding with these kids, and there's a very, very symbolic moment where he lets that velociraptor claw fall from his grip. He lets go of it. It falls out the tree onto the ground, and that kind of symbolizes, connects to that moment at the beginning of the film when he kind of wound up, teased that little boy. And according to this book, that is the 5-second moment. It's that moment in which he changes his mind, he finds transformation, he discovers that, in fact, kids are actually quite cool. At least some of them are, or some of them can be. And the dinosaurs kind of are all just padding. Well, I wonder what you think of that. Hi, Daniela. Just said, seen you come in there. And then he started, he said then later on in the book, he said, another example here, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first and best of Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones film. You might think it's a story about a man who is trying to find a religious artifact before the Nazis can get their hands on it. You might even think that it's a love story between Indy and Marion, but no. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a story about a man. And at that point, I stopped reading because I wanted to think about this for myself, because I know the film Raiders of the Lost Ark quite well. It's quite handy that he chose two films that I'm quite familiar with. So I was walking in the street and I was thinking, okay, Raiders of the Lost Ark, let's go through the whole plot, the whole film, every scene I can remember, everything that happens. I started to put it together piece by piece, scene by scene, and it started to really annoy me because I could not work out what was the 5-second moment. What was it that this film is about? Okay, let's say again, it's about change, it's about transformation. Does it have to be transformation of the protagonist, Indiana Jones, played by Harrison Ford? Well, I suppose it does. But is it not about, his love for Marion? And I'm going over this. No, it's not about that. It's about him chasing this religious artifact, the Ark. It's something about that. And then it was driving me crazy. I didn't want to give in because I can be quite stubborn sometimes. So that night, I decided to hire the film, rent it from Amazon Prime Video for €2.99. Watched it from start to finish, beginning to end, meticulously studied it, and I still couldn't work it out. And I thought, right, I'm going to keep reading the book now. I've given up the next day. I've given up. I'm going to find out what it was about. And I guess, or I bet it's something I don't agree with. I bet it's something kind of maybe contrived or something that I'm not going to agree with. So this is what he says, quite simply. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a story about a man who finds faith. And you, as somebody who has the film fresh in their mind, I absolutely agree with that. And I can't tell you how much I was kicking myself afterwards. All the way through the film, he's been disparaging of these certain ideas. He calls it hocus pocus, stuff that's kind of religious, stuff relating to the Ark and the story from which it came. And then just the moment before, well, I'm not going to tell you, I don't want to ruin the story for you, but he finds faith. And when he does, that's the 5-second moment. And I think that this is actually, whether you agree with this or whether you don't, it's a very nice idea to apply to the stories that you consume, to the books that you read, to the films that you watch, just as a way to think about it. Assuming we're studying or watching or consuming a good story, the filmmaker, the screenwriter, the author, or the storyteller will have crafted that story to make it about something. That's the only way it can be. It's our job to dig down, to dig into the story and try to uncover what that thing can be. And that also applies to when you yourself are telling a story. And I want to tell you one of my own stories now. And this is a story you may have heard before. It's a story I've told a few times. I think I told it once before in a lesson stream live. But if you've heard it before, keep listening, because I think I've developed the story a bit. And I'm very fond of this. I actually did a workshop today at a school for some vocational students studying at a vocational college here in Barcelona. And they were all about 20, 22 years old. And it was a workshop I did about storytelling. And I told them two of my own stories. This was one of them. And I was really happy that the story I'm going to tell you was the one they liked the best, because I asked which story did you prefer. So I'm really happy they voted this one, because it's a story it's taken a long time for me to develop, and I think that reading what I read in this book has kind of helped me even more. Now, the title of this story is "The Day I Won the Banter by Mistake." The day I won the banter by mistake. And I wonder, not everybody here, I'm going to guess, will know what banter is. banter. And I'm quickly going to my Macmillan dictionary here and typing it in to give you a definition. The definition of banter, according to the Macmillan dictionary, is friendly conversation in which people tell jokes and laugh at each other. That's very important. They make fun of each other. I've heard people say that banter is a quintessentially English thing. That British people, or I should have said British. Why am I saying British, not British, when I'm a Scottish person? Why? But I think that some people think that banter is quintessentially British. I disagree. Because, well, for a start, I hear people in Barcelona and all over the world doing this. We make fun of each other when we're talking, don't we? And I'll give you an example. Downstairs, behind that wall, downstairs in the street, is a cafe that I frequent, that I like to go to most days to have my daily coffee and croissant. And the owner of the cafe is called Fernando. And my relationship with Fernando is very much based on banter. We really do make fun of each other a lot, but we really do love each other too. And let me give you an example. So I could start the day going for my coffee, and Fernando would say, "¿Qué tal, cabrón?" Which is a really good way, don't you think, to start the banter. Now, Fernando is from Galicia, so we always speak in Spanish. And I have to say, he's much better at winning the banter, because he's more committed to it. He's more dedicated to it. I just go along with it. But also, of course, we're speaking in Spanish, which is his first language. But this is the day, of course, don't forget, that I won the banter by mistake. You see, what I was doing, I was in the cafe, and I had my phone beside me, and Fernando walked past, and he happened to notice that on the phone, this is the image that I have on my phone, the wallpaper. And Fernando said to me, he said, he said, "¿Por qué un hombre como tú tiene un pajarito en su móvil?" Which means literally, why does a man like you have a little bird on his mobile phone? Now, I don't know what Fernando meant by that. I've got no idea, but it's a great example of Fernando, starting the banter, making fun of me. Hello, Anna from Uzbekistan. Lovely to see you. And so I had to explain to Fernando that, there's a very good reason why I have this photograph on my mobile phone. You see, my mother took this photograph. My mother's a very good photographer, and she saw this little bird on a tree in her garden in Scotland one winter a few years ago. She took the photograph, she sent it to all her friends that winter for our Christmas card, and I always liked that picture. Don't you like it? Don't you think it's quite beautiful? It's a waxwing. That's what it's called. I should have tested you. And Fernando said, "Que tonterías, what nonsense." ese no es un pajarito escocés, which means, what nonsense. That is not a Scottish bird. And I said, you're absolutely right, Fernando. Tienes razón, que no es un pajarito escocés. It es un. And then I realized that I needed a piece of language. What do you call a bird that flies from one zone to another, from one country to another, maybe in search of warmer climates, maybe in search for food? Because that's exactly what waxwings are. Waxwings are native to Scandinavia, and every winter they fly to warmer places like Scotland. Who'd ever thought Scotland is warmer than Scandinavia? And that's what this is. And the word I'm looking for, the term I'm looking for, of course, is a migratory bird. A migratory bird. But I didn't know that in Spanish. I didn't know how to say a migratory bird in Spanish. But of course, is that a problem for any communicator like me or like you? Of course not, especially when I have my teacher's voice ringing in my head. What do we tell our students when they lack a term? We say, if you don't know the word, paraphrase. Find an alternative way to express the idea. And that's what the voice in my head told me. And so that's exactly what I did. I said to Fernando, sí, Fernando, tienes razón. Ese no es un pajarito escocés. Es el tipo de pajarito que vuela de un lugar a otro. Cuando, por ejemplo, busca otros climas donde hace más calor o cuando están buscando comida. Y supongo que este pajarito estaba volando por Escocia, por el jardín de mis padres, y vieron un árbol y decidieron aterrizar en el árbol. Y mi madre vio el pajarito y sacó el foto. That was me paraphrasing a migratory bird in Spanish. What did you think of the job I did? Did you think I did a good job? I want you to rate my paraphrasing. Would you give me between a mark out of 0 to 10? What would you give me? I know that if this was live, you'd all be clapping me, you'd be applauding me and said, well done, Jamie. Great paraphrasing there. The strange thing is that Fernando looked at me and he was not impressed. He wasn't impressed at all. He said to me, "Qué tonterías, Jamie." Oh, no, he didn't actually say that at all. He said, "Qué cabrón eres, Jamie." "Qué cabrón eres, Jamie." Cabron's a good word in Spanish. It's difficult to translate it, but it's slightly disrespectful, isn't it? "Qué cabrón eres, Jamie. ¿Tú piensas que yo no sé qué es un ave migratorio?" Which means, do you really think that I don't know what a migratory bird is? So despite the fact that Mark there has been very generous and given me a solid 8 for my paraphrasing performance, Fernando was really not impressed. And you see what happened there? What happened was that I won the banter by mistake. And I love telling this story to my students. And I've always, it's taken me a long time, I think, to give this story shape. But I'm quite happy with the shape it has now. And the question I would ask you is, what's this story about? Because if I've actually withheld my own kind of commentary here. I've not told you, but I would like to tell you what my 5-second moment is, what for me this story is about. But I'd like you to consider this yourselves first. What's this story about? What's the value in it? What's my moment of change? What's my transformation in a way? Let's just find again this, what he said. Matthew wrote here. He said that, chapter 4. I've forgotten which page it was. He said, the 5-second moments are the moments of your life when something fundamentally changes forever. That doesn't have to be grand, though. It doesn't have to be something huge. It can be something very, very small, which is something in this case. You fall in love. Not in this case. You fall out of love. No, you discover something new about yourself or another person. Your opinion on a subject dramatically changes. You find forgiveness. You reach acceptance. You sink into despair. You grudgingly resign. You're drowned in regret. You make a life-altering decision, choose a new path, accomplish something great, fail spectacularly. Now, this is where I'm not so. This is where I disagree, because I think the change can be much, much smaller than that. It could be something important, but much smaller than that. And for me, this is important because somebody just gave me a 10 for my paraphrasing performance. I've still got my in the chat there. I'm wondering if you can. I'd love to see some wrong answers. I'd love to see. That's very kind, by the way. Some wrong answers here. What do you think this story is about for me? I'll tell you, it's about the messiness of communication and me realizing how messy communication can be. And a great case study here is paraphrasing. Now, we tell our students to paraphrase. We tell them to express ideas using different words, don't we? But how often, do we ever tell them that before you paraphrase, mark your paraphrasing with the words? Well, I don't know how you say it in English, but, or in my case, I could have said to Fernando, bueno, no sé cómo se dice en español, pero es el tipo de ave que vuela. You see, that's me marking the paraphrasing which is coming with just a little kind of understanding that what's coming next is my paraphrasing performance, let's say, because without doing that, Fernando misunderstood why I was doing. He thought I was treating him as if he was stupid. And this is in that case, it was quite fun for me to do so because I won the banter by mistake. But in another situation, I might not want to have done that. So this is a story about the messiness of communication, the unpredictability of communication, and also as a sort of simulation for my students, an experience that they can have secondhand from their teacher so that they remember the importance of marking paraphrasing with the words. I don't know how you say it in English, but. And as I said today, I told this story and I was really happy that the participants enjoyed it. I don't know what you thought about it. Maybe I told it better today. Who's to say? Who's to say? Now, let me just wrap up with a little idea here. And this is something that we've spoken about before in a lesson stream live. The idea of grammar goggles. Grammar goggles. You see, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? That when a language teacher comes to a story or comes to a text, comes to an authentic text, let's say, or a short film or an article, we bring our grammar goggles, and what that means is we focus on what this text can be used, or rather what piece of language this text can be used for. And I see this again and again and again. I know that you know exactly what I'm talking about. Before we even get to discussing the issues that the text has or the story has at its heart, teachers, we too often want to go straight for the grammar. And we say, I would use this text to teach Past simple. And when I hear that, I always die inside just a little bit. I think it's much healthier before you get that. This is what should come at the end. This is what should come at the very end. The question, what language or what grammar can I teach in combination with this text? We should be drilling down or digging down. If we're using a short story, asking questions like, what is this story about? What is if it's a short story, if it's a piece of fiction, let's say, or if it's a story like the one I've just told you, what is it about? What is at the heart of it? What is the heart of this story? In a previous lesson stream live, we looked at a story called The Story of the Maverick Fish. And you might remember it, you might not, but I'm going to read it to you right now. It's quite a short story. This is it. So I'm going to read to you the story of the Maverick Fish. And this is a story that's part of a lesson plan in the lesson stream membership, one of 115 lesson plans. Once upon a time, a visitor visited an aquarium. She saw sharks, rays, clownfish, surgeonfish, a sunfish, an octopus, snails, hermit crabs, and even penguins. But the thing that got the visitor's attention was a shoal of little fish swimming round and round in their tank. There must have been 1,000 of them, and they were all swimming in the same direction. For a few minutes, the visitor stood in front of the tank and contemplated the shoal. She marveled at how incredible it was that these tiny creatures should come together and behave like a much larger creature with a mind of its own. But just as the visitor's own mind was racing with Buddhist-like thoughts, she noticed something interesting. A single solitary fish swimming in the opposite direction. Whereas the rest of the shoal was swimming clockwise, this little maverick was going anti-clockwise. Now, the visitor was both fascinated and confused. She wondered what could possibly motivate the fish to behave in such a peculiar way. Overcome with curiosity, she decided to look for an answer. She turned to the only aquarium employee in the area, a security guard. The security guard seemed to know what the woman was going to ask even before she asked it. He smiled and nodded all the way through her question. "It's fascinating, isn't it?" said the security guard. "And do you know what makes it even more incredible? It's always the same fish. If you look closely, you'll see a tiny dark mark just above its eye. But why does it swim in the opposite direction to the rest of the shoal?" asked the visitor. "Well, I have often wondered that myself. I have even asked the marine biologists who work here, if they can explain. They are humble enough to admit that they don't know the answer. But do you know something else? I've had many conversations with many other visitors about that fish. In fact, if I had to guess, I would say that for every 1,000 people who stand in front of that tank, one person will notice the fish and ask me about it." And that's the story. Now, I've used this story many times in many workshops, and I've used a very open task for teachers. I've given them a copy of this text, this story, and I said, what I want you to do is just consider how you would use it in your classroom. What would you use it for? What would you do with it? What would you get your students doing with it? And do you remember I said that when teachers come back and say, well, I would use it to teach the past simple, I die just a little bit inside. And I really do, because so often this is the answer I get back. Teachers have got their grammar goggles, and this is such a great way to approach it, or to kind of illustrate it. If you're saying that you're going to use this text to teach the past simple, I would say that's really underusing it. And I know that if that's the answer teachers are going to come up with, then they've definitely got their grammar goggles on. They're looking at this text and saying, what's the language point? What's the grammar point? What's the grammar point? What's the grammar point? It's a story. It's in past narrative. There's lots of instances of the past simple. Therefore, I would use this to teach the past simple. I mean, the thing is, though, this text is graded or leveled for maybe a strong B1, even a B2 level of language learner. Strong B1s, B2s, they don't need to study the past simple. They already did it at A1, A2 level, So again, I would say, well, why is this really a good use of this text? I would say it's a much, much, much better activity or frame of mind, I should say, for any teacher to take off your grammar goggles and start to dig down into the story and start to ask questions like, what's this story about? What are the issues at the heart? What does it mean? Start to think questions like this. And I'm not going to go into what this story means, because we had a whole we dedicated a whole lesson stream live to it, and I'll put that I'll link to it in the description below. But what I would say, is that once you can start to understand what a story is about, then you might start to see possibilities for language. You see, and another thing we did, we had a podcast with Scott Thornbury, and I actually visited Scott in his house in Barcelona, made a little podcast, and asked Scott, what do you make of this story? What would you use it for? How would you use it in your classroom? And we had quite an interesting discussion. And Scott said, well, but we talked about the issues. We talked about what the story means. But Scott also said, well, this is a story. At the heart of the story, there's things that go on in your mind. Bear with me one moment. Sorry about the delay there. Yes. So we have, for example, it's a story that involves mental processes. There are many nouns, adjectives, verbs, and phrases that refer to mental processes, things that happen in the woman's head. That's not necessarily what the story is about, but that's a key part of what the story is. And there's so much language, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and phrases. And so one of the things that I've got my students doing with this story is to underline as many pieces of language as they can possibly identify that involve mental processes, things like to get the visitor's attention, to contemplate the show, to marvel, incredible, her mind was racing, she noticed something, interesting, Buddhist, rich thoughts, fascinated, confused, wonder, overcome with curiosity, etc., etc. And so rather than looking for one neatly packaged grammar point or past simple, let's say, we're looking for something which it's maybe a bit more lexical in this case, but you will never get it when you're just looking for grammar. So the closing thought for today, when you're using an authentic text, any story-based authentic text for teaching, take off your grammar goggles and start to dig down and ask questions like, what is this text about? Who is it about? Where's the transformation? Where's the change? What are the issues? What's at stake? And then when you start to think about these things, and start to see discussion points for your students, then you can start to recognize language that can come from it. And that's the closing thought for the day. Now, does anybody here have any questions, anything to say, anything to ask? Because really, that's all I've got to share with you today. That's all I'm going to share with you today. Anyone got anything to say? As I mentioned, this the lesson plan for the Maverick Fish is one of 115 lesson plans in the Lesson Stream membership. And a lot of the ideas that we're looking at here about finding the meaning in your story and developing your story are explored in more detail in the Lesson Stream story course. And if you're interested in getting instant access to all of these things, all you have to do is join the Lesson Stream membership. The link is in the description below. So I've got my eyes on the chat. I'm aware that there's a 15-second, possibly even 20-second delay between you seeing and hearing me between me speaking and from you hearing what I say. It takes 20 seconds. So I don't think there's any comments or questions. So in that case, just do say something. I'd love to ask you one question. Has the quality of this stream been okay for you? Has the picture been clear? Has the sound been clear? I'd really love to know the answer to that. Am I coming in nice and loud and clear? Because I'm trying something new today, and my worry or my question, my concern is perhaps Daniela says it has. It has been clear, Daniela. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Say, give me a smiley face or a like that, or an unhappy face like that. Antonella says perfect. I'm really happy. Daniela says it's been a good crystal clear, and thank you very much. How would you use this Monet masterpiece? I would serve breakfast on it. Paraphrase, how would you use this text for past simple? Ksenia, that's a bit cryptic for me. Oh, I see. How would you use this Monet masterpiece? I would serve... I see, I got you now. So basically, how would you use this masterpiece? I would serve breakfast on it. Yeah, exactly. You know, when a great piece of art or when a really well-crafted story is reduced to models of deduction, that's when we go, no, please don't. Because if you go straight for the grammar, you're going to miss out on the communication possibilities for the tasks. So that's really funny. So thank you so much for joining me. Same time next Thursday, 6 o'clock Spanish time. I'll let you know what's happening in advance. Please feel free to invite your friends, your colleagues, other teachers. All you have to do is invite them to sign up for the Lesson Stream post, which is all free, of course. And in order to do so, you just go to lessonstream.com. All right. So I want you to have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye now.